Hello, welcome. My name is Nelrond, and today we're going to be introducing you all to Adventure Architect and discussing how to use this program to create battle maps to play Dungeons and Dragons and various other D20 games. The primary focus is going to be on Dungeons and Dragons and how this program can be used to amplify your game to create great scenes in which you can play out various scenarios. I had a friend who was asking me just how to use this program because it's a little bit confusing. I definitely get that. So what I'm looking to do here is to kind of streamline your whole game creation process. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So I'm going to include links to be able to download this program, as well as to their Patreon. It's a really cool program. It gets updated fairly regularly. And what it has available is just so good, very adaptable, and it can fit really well into whatever campaign you may have. If you look down here in the bottom corner, I realize you cannot see my cursor. Let me just fix that real quick. Alright, so over down here below you can see that I have a pro version. That means I'm a Patreon supporter. I've gotten a CD key, unlocks the game, and the full versatility of the program. Now, you do not need to support it to be able to use this program, in particular with single mode. Pro is mostly just for multiplayer mode and being able to host games in the program. If you have the free version, you can use single mode, or you can join games created by somebody with the pro version who's hosting it in multiplayer mode. With that, I'm not going to explore the multiplayer mode. I'm very unfamiliar with it. I don't really use it. Whenever I host Dungeons and Dragons games, what I'll do is I'll actually screencast Adventure Architect to my Discord group. So I'll go into single mode, load up my map, and then start screen sharing. And then I'll have my players kind of tell me what they want their characters to do. Now, I'm going to very quickly kind of glance over at this top menu up here. Oh, my grid is hiding. There we go. So, very quickly, left click is kind of your default to select anything here. You cannot change your keybind settings, just so you're aware. If you have a second monitor, you can make use of that, and it's really helpful because you can have either monitor display different things. So, for example, if we go down here to Fog of War, you can have Fog of War turned on your main display that you are, say, screen sharing, and then on your second display, you can have no Fog of War, and that allows you as the GM to be able to move objects and characters around without your players being able to see them if they are shrouded in the Fog of War. If you are playing online and you choose only characters, the characters that you and their icons down below will each individual player will have their own Fog of War displayed based on their character's positions and what walls are in the way, what terrain is in the way, and the like. You can adjust the UI scale so that way in case all of this looks a little too small, it can be a little bit more visible, especially if you're playing with a larger monitor. Personally, I like to have it at the smallest because I feel it clutters up your screen space just a little too much. Once again, further down in the options, you can have the FPS counter, which is shown up here in the top right. You can have show initiative queue on the second display because I'm not using the second display. I can't see it. If I turn that off, well, you'll end up seeing it pop up over here. For the graphics, you can choose your resolution. I keep it matching with my screen display. Texture quality, this is mostly going to be affected by how much RAM you have available on in your PC. Shadows, you can turn those on or off, depending on how powerful your GPU is, as well as affecting shadow resolution. The higher the resolution, a lot harder it's going to be on your computer. I believe it's either your GPU or your CPU is affected by these. You can also affect the draw distance of shadows. The lower you have it, when you have it set to lower, only shadows that are close to your camera will be displayed, and shadows that are much further away will not be displayed. VSync, I personally like having this on. Every now and again, depending on how large the map you make is and how dense all the objects are and how many lighting effects you can have your FPS dip and you may encounter screen tearing. So having VSync on will really prevent you perceiving those artifacts from screen tearing. So I click on apply, and with that, we have these buttons up here. So this, I believe, displays all the players that are currently in the lobby, and with that, that's how you can assign characters to each individual player. Here is your combat sheet window with your initiative tracker. Pretty straightforward. Over here, we have our, I'm guessing this is highlighting whose turn it is. Because I don't use online, I'm not familiar with it. And then we have the chat log, which includes things such as when you do dice rolls. When you roll a dice within the game, it'll display what was rolled and what it looks like and what the total was. Over here, you have your dice roll panel. So this is how you can choose to roll dice. Now you can make it private so it doesn't render. Sorry, before I get to that. Visualization. So if you have that on or off, if you roll a dice, modifier +1, and you have visualization on, you roll it, dice goes, and it shows up down here. If you turn off visualization and you roll, oh, never mind, doesn't show up. Oh wait, no, that's because I didn't choose a dice to roll. There you go. So over here, shows up, but without displaying the dice down here. Now this resets every time you roll it, so you're going to want to click on save when you frequently roll certain dice all the time. Clicking on save will kind of save you those extra steps of selecting which dice you want to roll. And if you make it a private roll, say we do visualization, roll that. Now, as you can see, it's kind of shadowed. That means only the Dungeon Master can see this die roll, and none of the other players can. So when you're rolling things like initiative for monsters for a combat encounter, that'll help you kind of keep that all private. Okay, so over here onto the building tools, we have the eyedropper. Now, this will be used to select tiles, such as like floor tiles, objects, walls, whatever. You'll be able to make a copy of it and be able to place it elsewhere. With the hammer tool here, this will destroy objects, floor tiles, and the like. You can also use it to destroy walls, creatures you've accidentally placed in, or ones that are, for example, that have died during a combat encounter and you just kind of want to remove them from the field. Over here is the terrain painter panel. I'll go into this a little bit more detail later. Personally, if you're just learning this program, I kind of recommend against using it right away. It's a little bit intense, and kind of getting used to it takes a little bit of practice and time. And I'll also include that as the same for water tools. So you've got pools of water here, and you've got rivers. And you've got 5 different textures for those water objects to be used. It's super cool because they all interact with light in different ways, and they all look really pretty depending on the brightness of your map and the like. Finally, up here we have measuring tools, so this can be used for combat encounters when you're casting spells or abilities. You want to track movement. You want to see whether or not certain objects are in range. So with the cone tool, so your Dragonborn uses a cone of fire, like their fire breath attack, and it's a cone. You click on it, and you drag it out. So you left click to choose it, left click on the map, and you'll do a final left click after you've brought it out to its appropriate size. The eraser tool removes those. You have the same thing with the sphere, and that is done by, I believe the right term is not circumference. Pi r squared. No, maybe circumference is right. Either way, it is measuring the full width of that sphere. So it's not by radius. The radius would be, 12.5 feet or whatever. Same thing with cubes. Starts from the center and spreads out. So that's something to really keep in mind if you want to be very precise on where the corners of these measurements are. And once again, same thing. From the center is where it's measured. And then you also have line tools. So they can be anywhere from 5 feet wide to whatever length that you may need. And I don't know if there's actually an upper limit on how wide it can be. Let's just find out real quick. Yeah, there's no upper limit. But you can have these as wide as you need them to be. So things like wall of fire, you'd be able to, be able to place that down, and that would be like a static, permanent thing until you erase it, of course. And then you have just regular measurements. So, if you want to measure someone's movement up to, say, 50 feet, boom, you have that. So 25 feet by 25 feet. If you select any other tool, that ruler is going to go away. Finally, you have the grabbing tool. So in case you create your cube and you wanted to move it a little bit more, you can grab it and move it freely. And you can do that with all of these objects. You can also change the color. You got full free selection on what that color may be. It's pretty handy, really cool, especially too because you want to set specific colors for different players and their enemies and the like. If you choose 2D, it'll create a flat cone. So there's not going to be any elevation on that. So with that, we'll move over to the camera controls. So you've got whatever your elevation, what level you want to build on, whatever level you want to interact on, you can select it by clicking on the plus and minus to choose which level you're going to be interacting with. You can also do that by pressing page up and page down. I personally prefer using those over, moving my mouse way up over here to the top and clicking on those. With the sub options here, you have hide top levels. So when you build, say, a 4-story mansion for your characters to explore in, and they're on the first floor, if you do not have that selected, you have to zoom in really close, and it's almost like you're in first-person view. And if you want to be able to view top down, you want to see everything that's going on that first floor, you'll click on hide top levels, and they'll be able to freely see what's going on there, or you will. Show grid. So as you build, and you lay out tiles, that grid is going to stay there. And even if you have the grid hidden, all objects are going to naturally snap to match with that grid. Terrain grid goes with the terrain building tool here. And as you create mountains and whatnot, it'll retain perfect 5-foot squares. You'll see them kind of get deformed. But it's another way to be able to still see the grid, even through mountains and whatnot. Over here, Now, for reference tools, I personally highly recommend, if you can, try to build your maps in whatever image editor of your choice is, or if you're using like a pre-built campaign and you have battle maps for that, try to obtain those digitally, have them saved, because then you can go through, click on load image, and you can open up this battle map. Try as much as you can to try and square up the orientation. When you're building walls and the like, you can't do any corner angles, like half corners. There's no rounded corners or anything of that sort. It's a little bit limited in that regard, but personally, it's never really bothered me. With that, you can choose to hide and show it. So as you're building, so if you lay out floor tiles, it'll cover up this image. This image is just below the building level. It's kind of hard to see here, but if you look over here, you can see that it's lined up, but it's just underneath the building level. So anything you build will be built on top of this, and you'll cover up that reference image. So make sure you keep that in mind. You can move it in your 4 cardinal directions, and it's repeating grid image. So as you move it, it's going to continuously loop around. And then you can move it all 4 directions once again. You can also adjust the scale, so if you find that your image is not quite lining up perfectly, you can grow and shrink it from this bottom left corner outwards in various directions. You can distort it, make it bigger. If you find you can see that there's grids on this battle map. If you're finding that they aren't lining up very nicely, you might have to skew the image to fit more appropriately. Yeah, I think that's it for these top menus. When you go in up here in the very, very top, you got build mode and combat mode. So currently we're in build mode. So we have all of our building tools here off to the side that are fully available to us. We can see it. If I'm screen sharing, everyone else can see it. But if I click on combat mode, that disappears. And at that point, all you can really do is just interact with the objects that are currently on your battle map. Now, I'm going to quickly kind of go over our controls, make things a little bit easier for you all. WASD will move you around. So if you're familiar with first-person shooters or playing PC games, this is going to be very intuitive. Q and E are used for raising. So E raises up the elevation of your camera, Q lowers it. So you can kind of go in, get kind of a nice closer look. Or say, for example, if you wanted to visualize traveling through some very narrow dungeons, you can do that. I believe it's if you hold down Shift, you'll move a lot faster. Whereas if you don't hold Shift, you have a set speed that you move at. Other shortcuts we'll go over as we kind of lay out a few objects and let you guys kind of see what you can and cannot do. Now, I'm going to choose asphalt. Ashfault, I believe. I don't know. I've never pronounced that word right. But anyways, if you left-click whatever floor tile you would like, and you can place it. Now, if you just click it, you'll get a square there. If you click and hold, you can make a square. Now with that, if you hold Control, you'll highlight the delete. Left click, deletes it. You can click and drag in the same way to erase those objects. With walls, pick a wall, it'll load. Same deal, except you can't just click and place a wall. You have to click and drag, build you a wall. If you hold Alt, click, you can make squares. Or maybe not even so much a square, but you know, you'll create an enclosed space. If you hold down Control, you'll be able to click, drag, and delete. Tragically, there's no easy way to do that with squares, as far as I'm aware. Move over to the doors. So let's very quickly rebuild some walls. Doors. You happen to have a selection of 5 doors. With all of these, you have a fairly wide selection. This the developer here is slowly adding in more doors, windows. When I was first started using this program, there was only 2 doors and 1 window. It was a little bit tough to work around, but now this is actually a lot better. When you place a door, it'll load and it'll snap onto walls. You can rotate its orientation so it faces different directions by pressing R. And you click and it's placed. Left click away and it'll no longer be highlighted. Doors and none of the windows have other states. Only doors have this, where they have 2 states. You can open and close them, and then a little animation will play, and I believe there was just a little sound effect. It's pretty handy. But you have to make sure that you click on it first to make sure you highlight it, then right click. You can also free rotate almost all, or no, this is fixed rotate. Okay. Most objects you're going to be able to place will have a free rotate option, so you'll be able to do all sorts of zany things with placing them. With Windows, it does the exact same thing. You click on a window, and it snaps. Now, when you press R, it'll designate whether it's on the outside or the inside. So if you know what the outside of your building is, you're going to want to have windows very clearly facing the outside. As you can see, if you click and right-click, it gives you the option to open and close it. That doesn't do anything. Imagine that's future functionality they plan to add. Now, if you click on these objects and you press delete, they'll be deleted. Makes things very easy in that regard. We also happen to have roof tiles. And when you want to place roof tiles, they're not automatically going to snap to the top. They're actually going to get placed very similarly to floor tiles. So that's when you're going to want it to make sure that you move up a level, click, drag. So when you're first laying it out, you're seeing like these kind of jagged pointed edges, but this program will automatically kind of combine them together to create like a uniform shape, so it actually looks like a roof. I want to unselect this. There. And this is what's going to allow you to kind of create unique spaces. Similar to if you want to delete, hold down Control, click and drag, and it'll disappear. Finally, you have the stairs object over here. Now these can be freely moved around. They're sort of like decorative objects. So you place it, it's there. You can click on it again and press R. Once you have it selected, that'll that'll fix rotate it. And yeah, no, it still has fixed rotate as the option. Okay. When you're going to go and place decorative objects, you can press and hold Alt, and that allows you to free move it and free place it. And these objects will interact with others. So if you wanted to create, some kind of a twisted maze, here, let me hide that image. You can create all sorts of zany shapes, zany objects. A little bit sucks that you can only fix rotate right here, but that's fine. With other objects here, now this is all your decoration. So you happen to have these 5 tabs up at the top. So you have every object. You've got like furniture and kind of like sort of decorative pieces, stuff that you'll have like sitting on the ground, coffins, basically places that'll be storage or serve some kind of like a living use. I found there's some that seem to be kind of like in really weird spots, like a bear trap being here. I don't really consider that a piece of furniture, but hey, whatever. Over here, we've got terrain decoration. You've got various fixtures, things that kind of like hang up on the wall or be placed on the ground. So you got like plants and trees, a garden, rocks. There's quite a bit in here, some signs. They're all pretty great. Storage containers. Now, because there's no real like persistent objects or like character profiles in this program, like everyone's gonna have to rely on their character sheets on like Roll20, D&D Beyond, or just plain old pen and paper character sheets. Personally, I'm a big fan of pen and paper. I quite like the textile feel of it. I like being able to like erase and be able to write, and it's overall very pleasant experience. But this is kind of like where you'd have like lootable containers, things that, say for example, your players are like, oh hey, I want to explore, I want to search these barrels here, and then you as a game master, you either say they found something or they didn't, but there's not going to be like objects spawning out of these. Over here, we have light fixtures, so things like campfires, candelabras and the like. All these items emit light, and they will cast shadows. So over here, you can see there's a shadow actually being cast from this staircase. If I move this, right, like the dynamic shadows are amazing. Oh, I didn't even touch onto that. Oh well, I'll come back to that later when we go over to the other maps. The big thing is with those lighting effects is they are very resource intensive. But those are going to be your light fixtures. Those are going to kind of give the place like a warmth and a sense of light. Over here, you have like magical light effects. Some of them emit very little light, and some of them emit a lot of light. Various fire effects. They all look super cool. I freaking love these things. Magic circles and all that fun stuff. So like if players are kind of standing close to some of these, it'll cast shadows. It's super neat. And then that'll bring us over to our monster tab. Monster and creature tab is, to be more precise, really. So you've got various 3D models that you can put in and have placed. Some of them are animated, some of them are not. There isn't a huge selection, but of what's available, there's quite a bit you can work with. I quite enjoy all of these. Like, they're gorgeous. I've no idea if this person's like modeling and rendering these themselves, or maybe like they're publicly available, or who knows what, but they all look super great. As it is, you're going to find that not all of these cover all your needs in the game. You got your player characters are going to be unique models, and you can't really add any. You happen to have, you're able to search via monster type and the like. This is a favorites tab. I cannot say I'm familiar with how to favorite. I've never had to use it. We got a lich over here. And these are objects that you can also free rotate. So you press and hold Alt, you can move them around freely within their space. If you move them over, their base, the stand that they're standing on, will move and designate which square that they're occupying. But sorry, I was going to go over to this. So you happen to have paper minis. So you've got creatures, monsters, bosses, and the like. You can place these in as like stand-ins for your characters. And they're all super handy. It's a great way to kind of have like your player characters in the map without having to kind of choose like a stand-in for them. Because obviously not all of these are going to fit. How to add a paper miniature. So if you're doing all your dice rolling and the like within this program, you can put in all the stats that are needed for these characters to punctuate their dice rolls and the like. So you can measure out things like their hit points, their speed, you see their initiative bonus right over here. Like, these things can all be precisely put in, and everyone else is going to be able to kind of see that information. And you want to choose an image, which at that point you'll take either an image you've downloaded or you've created in whatever program of choice you may have. You can place them in here, and then you also get to choose the avatar. So, whatever size the character is, perhaps, their portrait's down here. Who knows? Choose a transparent background. So, as you can kind of see here, this monster over here happens to have a see-through background, whereas this player character over here does not. And that's affected by the image type. So, if you're using JPEG images, they don't have any transparency in the image. It's just how that image file works. Personally, I prefer to have it where they're transparent as much as possible, because when you throw down light effects, they'll create shadows. Whereas these guys, without a transparent background, he's not really going to cast a shadow. He's going to look kind of like a wall. Once again, that kind of goes back to how your computer can handle all this. So that covers essentially all the basics. Objects, free moving. You can break, the laws of physics however you may want. It's pretty great. It's delightful. Damn. All right, cool. So what's left here on my list is going to be covering terrain. Now, when you do terrain, here, let's just do a whole new map. So when you create a map, you have to choose a map name, and you got to choose the map size. You can go anywhere from 1 by 1 up to 99 by 99. You cannot make maps any bigger than that. Try to limit your map size to just what you need, and that's going to boil down to your map planning. Because if you end up making the map size too big, you're going to find that you have a lot of empty space, and it's going to take longer to load. So we're going to stick with the default 30 by 30. Oh wait, I guess you don't have to choose test 1. So create a new map. Also, scroll wheel can be used to go up and down. Just a little pro tip for you. So what we're going to explore now is our terrain painting tool. So you're going to select the first option, and you can turn on your terrain. Now, when your terrain base is set to 0, everything's at basically sea level, is how you probably want to consider that. But you can change that. Set it to 1, it goes up a level. Set up to 4 or 5, goes up really high. And you're going to be able to build on top of that. Next up, you've got your textures that you can choose from. So by default, grass is selected. And you can change that to, say, sand, which is, I believe the second option is whatever your default's going to be. Oh god, sorry. Why is that so bright? Don't know why. Snow was selected in that way, but hey. Alright. Now, you can only have 4 terrains selected at any time. If you try to choose too many textures, it's not going to end very well. And that's just for painting. You can use different textures. Some of them are going to have different levels of opacity. And you can have them kind of like blend into each other, which is super handy. But now what we're going to move on to is the terrain building itself. So sculpting, building up mountains and the like. So as you can see here, thankfully they included like hints up here. You can left click to raise, hold shift and click to lower, hold alt to smooth, hold control to align the current floor. With that, click, rises. Shift and click, lowers. So you can build some really interesting and fun terrain, create different dips. Super, super awesome. Yeah, anyways, so say for example, let's start here. So if I hold build up, when you align to the current floor, so say for example, you only want to create a cave or a dip in the terrain that only goes down to a certain level, you'll click and hold control and it'll flatten it to that. If you highlight terrain that's below that, it'll only rise to that level. Right? Looks super pretty. Looks very nice. I personally don't really like using this brush. It just doesn't look as natural. Whereas all these other brushes can look a lot more natural, create lots of like sweeping dips. I think this one's actually probably one of my favorites. But yeah. So with that, you can create, that's a wrong button. But creating things like craters. Tons and tons of fun you can have with that. The trade-off, though, being objects that you might want to place. So let's start over here. We'll just grab a basic table. Now, it'll clip underneath unless you hold Alt to free move it. But then you're going to have objects get kind of placed in weird ways, or even to like building walls. Click, drag. Depending on how you want to build this, you can create like some like integrated fortresses into the sides of mountains and the like. Yeah, so much fun with that. I just love the idea of that kind of stuff. But you're really gonna have to play around with it very carefully because it's a bit imprecise, and it'll make things kind of it can complicate things in many, many ways. Yeah, personal recommendation is if you're going to be going and you want to use this program to build battle maps, throw on a podcast, throw on your favorite YouTube videos, what have you, and just kind of go through, play around, build, and make sure that you have a really good idea of what you're wanting to build. I'll finish this up with showing you some of my maps. Some of them are pretty intense. I'm a big fan of like really big exploratory battle maps, kind of. But I find that sometimes even my computer can't handle everything. So over here you can kind of see, oh, I want to zoom out a little bit. Oh, I was a fool too. Up here at the top, you've got your kind of like scene setting stuff. Avoid rain if you can. It's super loud. It's a major pain. But currently we have the weather set as fair, and you can set the time of day just by moving the scroll wheel, which is super great. and you got some super cool lighting effects. People are going to cast shadows. It's going to look nice. Whereas if you choose, the downside to that though is the color of the terrain changes depending on the time of the day, which I believe is supposed to be rather natural, but sometimes I find like some of the water textures look kind of gross. Over here, this is like a sewer drain from a major city, kind of just running out and into this river here. If you choose dungeon, you can have your brightness set to whatever you want, and I find the color balance is a little bit more neutral, which I also quite enjoy. Let's try out another map to kind of show off here. All right, yeah. Map I'm going to show you is my biggest map, and it's really full. There's a ton of lighting effects, lots of objects, lots of walls, and this is kind of like a city street. It's huge. There's a lot of objects. There's a lot of textures. There's a lot of things going on in this map, and I've had it crash on me a few times just by how much I have going on in this map. And that's why I personally recommend avoid doing like building up like max size maps. What you can do with this program is you really run with it. Oh, yes, I got it. All right, cool. So here we are. If I choose combat mode, like over here, you can see like I got little smokestacks kind of billowing up here. If I click on combat mode, I can't interact with those objects anymore. I'll hide the grid. As you can see, like having all these dynamic shadows, all these dynamic light effects. You got lampposts casting shadows up onto a building here. We got shops over here, lots of bushes, lots of signs. But it kind of allows you to create a living space where major things have happened, will happen. All these buildings, personally, I'm a kind of a terrible DM. They're all empty. If I was to really play around and my players really wanted to explore, say, the insides of this place, I'd probably end up rolling with Theater of the Mind, because the more objects you introduce, the harder it's going to be playing, and you're generally not going to have that great of a time. But yeah, the only limit really with this program is your imagination, and I would, if you have the opportunity, really take your time, play around with it. It's, yeah. Thanks for watching. Bye.